One, two, three. Is this working? Hello? Hello? Hi. One, two, three. Okay. My Evia is in here.
Maybe she will come later. Did you show your hands?
No.
You good? Good morning. Oop, can you hear me well? Yeah? Perfect. Perfect. So welcome to All Souls, an open-minded community who is here to seek truth, practice love, and celebrate life. My name is Sandrine, and I will be your program coordinator for today. Very grateful for each one of you to be here this morning. Whether you are new to this community or have been here for years, you are welcome. Whatever your age, your race, your gender, your personal beliefs, or your socioeconomic background, you are valued here. And whoever you are and whomever you love, you belong here. Do we have any announcement for today? Yes, Kevin.
Thank you, Sandrine. Kevin Kolb here. Couple announcements. First of all, I understand on CBS Sunday Morning this morning, Good Earth State Park was featured with video from Kevin Kiergaard of Kettle. So check that out. I'm going to try to repost that onto All Souls Facebook page. Also, we're underway with our Rosebud Students donation drive. Next week, Leslie and Rose, who are involved with that on the other end, are going to be here speaking. And since Leslie is going to be here from the Mission area, we are moving our deadline from December 8th for gathering the stuff to next Sunday. And that'll save somebody a 6-hour trip back and forth. So please bring your stuff next Sunday or sooner if you want to make an arrangement with me or Mike Huber. We're in the directory. My number is sprinkled around. It's even on the outside in the front door if you can look hard enough. Anyway, please get your stuff in. I see actually about contributions from about 3 people is all we've collected so far. I think a couple things might have strayed in the lost and found box. So if you put in the lost and found box, moving on over to the Rosebud box, which is on the right side of the thing in the furniture in the entryway. Yeah, we're basically looking for snack items for kids to take home to make sure they have something to eat over Christmas break, and also mittens, hats, all those sorts of things to help keep them warm. And of course, they can certainly disappear from one season to the next, if not sometimes from within the hour. So, thank you very much. Rosebud Drive, due next Sunday.
Thank you, Kevin. Any other announcement? So I have a few. One is that we need your help on Sunday, so next week, December 1st at 4:30. We need to move the furniture, the table, the chairs downstairs because they're gonna redo the flooring. So we need your help Sunday, December 1st at 4:30. They're gonna strip and wax the floors and the hallways downstairs. I know that some of you were at Joy and Paul's house last night for a circle supper, and I hope the turnout was great and you have a great time. Maybe we will hear a little bit in the joys and concerns. Just wanted to announce the next one will be at our house, the 12th of December. I think, if I remember, it's a Thursday, so I hope you can come and join us. The last announcement is Women's Circle is happening December 16th. It's a Monday night here at All Souls from 7 to 8:30. And I think that's it. Carol? Thank you, Carol. So let the worship begin by lighting the chalice. Liz, if you could help me. And the word for the lighting are 442 in your gray hymnal. I'm going to read the normal, and you will read in response the italicized parts. We bid you welcome. We bid you welcome who come with weary spirit seeking rest. We bid you welcome who come with hope in your heart. We bid you welcome who are seekers of new faith. We bid you welcome who enter this hall as a homecoming. Whoever you are, whatever you are, wherever you are on your journey, we bid you welcome. Words from Richard Gilbert. Now I invite you to rise if you are able to our first song, 331 in your gray hymnal book. Life is the greatest gift of all. For our first reading, I invite you to open your book at 577. It is possible to live in peace. If someone with courage and vision can rise to lead in non-violent action, the winter of despair can, in the twinkling of an eye, be turned into the summer of hope.
It is possible to live in peace.
Non-violence is not a garment to put on and off at will. Its seat is in the heart. It must be an inseparable part of our being.
It is possible to live in peace.
Non-violence, which is a quality of the heart, cannot come by an appeal to the brain. It is plant of slow growth, growing imperceptibly but surely.
It is possible to live in peace.
If a single person achieves the highest kind of love, it will be sufficient to neutralize the hate of millions.
It is possible to live in peace.
If we are able to reach real peace in this world, and if we are to carry on a real war against war, we shall have to begin with the children.
It is possible to live in peace.
The future depends on what we do in the present.
It is possible to live in peace.
Words from Mohandas Gandhi. So now it is time for the story for all ages. I invite all the children and any children at heart to come closer. Good morning. So the story I'm going to read you today is called Thank You, Omu. Do you know what we are celebrating next week? Yeah. Thanksgiving, yes. How are you going to celebrate? Are you going to eat some yummy food? Are you going to see family? Yeah? Yeah? How about you, Lottie? See family? Yeah. So let's see what this story is about. Thank you, Omu. On the corner, let me remove those. On the corner of First Street and Long Street, on the very top floor, Omu was cooking a thick red stew in a big fat pot for a nice evening meal. She seasoned and stirred it and took a small taste. Oh, what a delicious stew, Omu said. Tonight's dinner will surely be the best I've ever had. With that, Omu put down her spoon and went to read a book before supper. As the thick red stew simmered on the stove, its scrumptious scent wafted out the window and out the door, down the hall, toward the street and around the block until, knock knock, someone was at the door. When Omu opened it, she saw, a little boy. Little boy, Omu exclaimed, what brings you to my home? I was playing with my race car down the hall when I smelled the most delicious smell, the little boy replied. What is it? It's a thick red stew. Stew, he sighed. That sure sounds yummy. Omu thought for a moment. She was saving her stew for dinner, but she had made quite a bit. It would not hurt to share. Would you like some? The little boy nodded, and so Omu spooned out some thick red stew from the big fat pot for her nice evening meal. Thank you, Omu, the little boy said, and went on his way. With that, Omu closed the door and went back to her book. As she read, her thick red stew's scrumptious scent wafted out the window and out the door, down the hall, toward the street and around the block, until, knock, 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 someone was at the door. When Omu opened the door, this time she saw, who is it here, you think? What does he look like? Yeah? Oh, a police officer. Mrs. Police Officer, Omu exclaimed, what brings you to my home? Well, I was on duty down the street when I smelled the most delicious smell, Mrs. Police Officer replied. What is it? Thick red stew. Oh, stew, she said, and her mouth watered. That sounds mighty tasty. Omu thought for a moment. There was still enough to share. Would you like some? The police officer nodded. Once again, Omu spooned out some thick red stew from the big fat pot for her nice evening meal. Thank you, Omu, the officer said, and went on her way. And so, for the second time, Omu closed the door and went back to her book. Sure enough, as she read, her thick red stew's scrumptious scent wafted out the window and out the door, down the hall, toward the street and around the block, until again someone was at Omu's door. This time, when she opened, she saw a hot dog vendor. Omu exclaimed, oh, what brings you to my home? Well, I was selling my hot dogs down the block when I smelled the most delicious smell, Mr. Hot Dog Vendor replied. What is it? Thick red stew. Stew? The vendor licked his lips. That sounds quite delectable. So Omu spooned out some thick red stew from the big fat pot for her nice evening meal. Thank you, Omu, the hot dog vendor said, and went on his way. Throughout the day, people from all across the neighborhood knocked on Omu's door. She fed a shop owner, a cab driver, a doctor, an actor, a lawyer, a dancer, a baker, an artist, singer, an athlete, a bus driver, a construction worker. Even the mayor stopped by. And each time they knocked, Omu shared. Soon the sky darkened, the streetlights brightened, and it was finally time for dinner. But when Omu opened her big fat pot of thick red stew for her nice evening meal, what do you think happened? I know. What do you think? It's empty? Yes. Uh-oh. Omu sniffled. There goes the best dinner I've ever had. Sorry and blue, she sat at the table with her empty pot until knock, 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 knock. Who could that be? Omu wondered. When she opened her door, she saw the little boy, the police officer, the hot dog vendor, the shop owner, the cab driver, the doctor, the actor, the lawyer, the dancer, the baker. Why, everyone she fed today was at her door. I'm sorry, everyone, Omu sighed. My thick red stew is all gone. I have nothing left to share. The little boy tugged at Omu's sleeve. Don't worry, Omu. We are not here to ask. We are here to give. The police officer carried in a fresh salad. The mayor centered with a roast chicken. The baker brought a collection of sweet goodies. Even the little boy presented Omu with something special in a shiny red envelope. Everyone who had knocked on Omu's door that day squeezed inside her tiny apartment, and together they ate, danced, and celebrated. While Omu's big fat pot of thick red stew was empty, her heart was full of happiness and love. That dinner was the best she had ever had. The end. So it looks like being kind, it always comes back to you in a multiple way. We're gonna send you off for your time downstairs with the song. Thank you for listening. So now I would like to invite you to one of my favorite traditions here at All Souls. We have found it very valuable to share the ups and downs of our lives by coming up here, choose a stone, warming up in your hands, and just expressing your joy and or concern you have. And when you are done, you place the stone in the bowl, and the ripple of the ripples of the water will carry out the concern or the joy you had to share. I'm gonna start. So I'm Sandrine, and one thing I wanted to share with you is that few months ago this summer, I went through a very difficult time where depression visited me once more. I think it was by far the most difficult episode I had, and death was constantly on my shoulder, trying to convince me to join, which was very hard to not be tempted to do it. But I got lots of help, and it's difficult for people who are witness that they feel just hopeless. They don't know what to do. And one thing, Allan actually did that, and another person did that too. He just came, sat with me, and kept looking me in the eyes like he could see the light within that I couldn't see myself. And to me, that was one of literally that's what saved me. So I'm very grateful for you, Allan, and for my friend Brooke, who helped with that. And so on that note, I just got a new job this week. I will be working at Sanford with, maybe some of you remember Bill Cooper, who was here a few weeks ago, who talked about his trip to France for meeting people who were related with his family. I think his grandpa who went to a war. So Bill Cooper is a dear friend, and he invited me to apply to be part of the spiritual care team at Sanford. For those who don't know about that, it's a program that is offered 20 hours a day, 7 days a week at Sanford Hospital. If you are hospitalized and are scared, need someone to talk to, the spiritual care team is here for that. So I will be joining the team as soon as the recruitment process will be over, which can take some time, but that's what Allan did for me. I want to do that for other people now, and sometimes you don't need words, just being a calming presence around someone can be just enough. So here we go. Now I invite you to come over to share whatever is in your heart, and if you all want to come and be in line, you are welcome to do so.
Hi, I'm Dan. Listening to stories, we all need that. I'm so pleased that JC and I are back going to nursing homes now. We were at Meadows on Sycamore yesterday, met with some really nice folks, and we're going to Sioux Falls Village this Friday, the day after Thanksgiving. We've incorporated a few hymns, violin duet hymns, familiar Thanksgiving hymns, and we'll be playing some of those next Sunday here. It kind of stirs up those good memories that people can have of meals together with family, and then we go around and visit with some of the people at the tables. It's good for us, and the joy and the smiles and the conversations that we have with people there make me feel really good about this kind of ministry. So JC and I are thankful to be part of this church, and we always say, we met at church.
Thank you.
I want to share an update on Achut Deng, the speaker who we found to speak at Augustana University last month. And she had a health issue the previous week, and so wasn't able to do the book signing that we had hoped for. And some have asked about how she's doing. And so I contacted Brianna, her assistant, who said that Achut is back in terms of speaking. She does have a speaking schedule, and she's able to keep that, but she isn't back at work at her day job at Smithfield. So anyway, there is that much progress, and very thankful to share that joy about Achut.
Thank you, Allan.
Hello, hello. I'm going to pick out the big rock because Hello. I picked out the big rock because yesterday where there was the potluck for everybody, and I brought my friend Dylan, and Dylan has many stories that I'm not going to share because they're not mine, but he needs community and family, as we all do, and it was just so wonderful to be able to bring him, and none of you scared him away. You were all very kind. You made him giggle, which is so rare. And like after we left and I dropped him off at home, and he gave me a big hug and he said thank you so much. And so I'll be kidnapping him again to bring him more often. But thank you all for making him feel so welcome and giving him food. I sent him home with a lot of leftovers. So he will be well fed. But thank you.
Yes.
Rock on.
Hi, I'm Scott. What do you get when you cross a vampire with a snowman? Frostbite. Many of you know I've just been switched over to a new job, and I'm finding it easier than the old one and enjoying it. I did notice that I needed to learn 2 more things that I didn't know. And yesterday I had, I guess, one of those milestones you have in life. It was the first time I ever fainted.
Oh. I'm going to put a final stone in the bowl as a symbol for all the joys and concerns that haven't been expressed. I invite you now to take a moment to reflect on both what has been shared and what has remained unspoken. Thank you. Now is the time for a second song. I invite you to open your book, page 161, Peace, the Perfect Word. And we're going to sing it on the tune of the 3:15, correct? 3:15, yeah. Thank you. Now, here for our second reading, page 597, Love versus Hate. Never does hatred cease by hating in return. Victory breeds hatred. They who give up all thought of victory or defeat let us overcome violence by gentleness. Let us overcome the miserly by liberality. Words from Dhammapada. And now it is the time to hear from our beloved minister, Allan. His message is Healing a Broken Society.
Yeah, such an ostentatious title, which I had to write last month before the election because we needed it for our publicity for the November calendar. So this title was regardless of the outcome of the election. And so anyway, I found a quote by Jefferson. We do not have government by the majority. We have government by the majority who participate. And we found the truth of that statement this year. So I think I have to start with kind of a caveat. The UU denomination in general is kind of out of step with the rest of society. I think most of you know that, and some of you maybe know it more than others. And so we are left-leaning, and it's not that we have to be, but it's just kind of the way it works out is, so with that in mind, we all know that what it's like to be in a minority or in a majority, and in this case, as a denomination that's out of step with much of society, we find ourselves in an awkward position, perhaps. If you were surprised about the results of the election, as many were, some it was a happy surprise and some it was an unhappy surprise. Many were caught off guard by the results. Someone wrote, "I am shocked to learn the size of our minority." And so anyway, it's always tempting to try to find somebody to blame, but I don't think there's any point in finger pointing. The job of a minister, one of the jobs is to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. So today, I feel like I'm talking mostly to people who feel afflicted. And so this will be aimed at helping you. But I also need to recognize the other side. And so I'm really struggling for words because we're not supposed to be biased or partisan in this situation. But like I said, I'm trying to be also candid about where we are as a denomination and where many of us are in this room since the election. So I'll start with the afflicting the comfortable and suggest that the words of Lao Tzu can be appropriate. Conduct your triumph as a funeral. There are unintended consequences. There are often unintended consequences. Here's one that really strikes me. After the Dobbs decision banning abortion in most states 2 years ago, the rate of abortion in this country actually went up. And as someone who works in a Sioux Falls high school, I can picture people with unplanned pregnancies struggling with their decision, and then hearing about this decision at the Supreme Court level and saying, well, they're not going to tell me what I can do. And so just for the sake of defiance, went ahead with an abortion. And I think that may be an example of unintended consequences. If there would be mass deportation that has been talked about, it could slow down the economy in a huge way if jobs go unfilled and thousands of businesses close. If there are tariffs on Chinese goods and the costs are passed on to the consumer, there could trigger a new round of inflation. So I think we ought to be aware of the danger of unintended consequences. So for most of this message, I'm dependent on the work of Pema Chodron, an author who is a Buddhist nun living in Canada. She's in her 80s now, so she speaks with the wisdom of old age. She wrote a book called When Things Fall Apart. And so I'm going to quote extensively from her words, which I think may be supportive for some of you. They have been for myself. The spiritual journey is not about heaven and finally getting to a place that's really swell. In fact, that way of thinking is what keeps us miserable. According to the Buddha, suffering is inevitable. And as long as we think we can avoid suffering, then it remains that much more inevitable. As long as we think that pleasure will last or success will last, we'll worry about losing it. Worry about losing the wealth. Worry about losing our health. Worry about losing whatever it is that we cherish so much. The only time we know what's really going on is when the rug has been pulled out and we can't find anywhere to land. We can allow this situation either to wake ourselves up or to lull ourselves to sleep. So there's a story of a family that had only one son who was their pride and joy. This is an old story. You've probably heard it before. And they were dependent on him, counting on him to care for them in their old age in a society where there wasn't Social Security and other safety nets. But anyway, the son had an accident, was thrown off the horse and broke his leg. And that, of course, devastated them, and they were very worried about how he could care for them. But then, during his time of convalescence, the army came along and snatched up all the young men that were available who were in good health to fight in the war. But their son was excused. And so something that seemed terribly tragic turned out to be actually a blessing in their lives. And so we must be aware that a great disappointment may also provide a great opportunity. We call things bad or we call things good, but we really don't know for sure what the eventual outcome will be. So there is yin and yang, as we think about in Chinese ancient philosophy, or the pendulum that swings. And sometimes the pendulum swings farther in one direction, only to swing farther back in the other direction eventually. I'm reminded of the words of Rudyard Kipling: if you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two impostors just the same. And so, as you use, we have 7 principles and 6 values. And so, as I was saying, we're out of step with the majority of Americans. We underestimated the size and the passion of the conservative evangelicals and the conservative Catholics and the conservative Latinos. So can we use this as a wake-up call, helping us to recognize how important our work is in this world, how badly our country needs the good news of this gospel that you espouse in our principles? Can we bend the arc of history toward justice? Part of the key is to find ways of dialogue instead of debate. To be able to enter into a conversation with a desire to learn from each other and not to convince. If we're debating, we're wanting to convince the other side, but if we're in dialogue, we're willing to learn. And so it's been found that whoever is underrepresented in your life will be overrepresented in your imagination. And so it's so easy to distort the people that we consider to be on the other side. But if we enter into a dialogue with a spirit of humility, then we're less likely to demonize the other side. An article from the Southern Poverty Law Center makes this distinction, and it pointed out that before the election, 80% of the people on each side were afraid for the future of our country if the other side won. And so each side was that suspicious of the other side. But maybe that becomes a kind of common ground. We all love our country. We have that in common with those who are different from us. So whatever we can do to get to know the other makes them less other. Young people especially can play an important role in this process. Young people have often been the conscience of the nation. Recall the college campuses where demonstrations took place against the Vietnam War during my impressionable years. Recall the young people who have spoken out against climate change or about climate change and school shootings and police brutality, and most recently the actions of Israel against Gaza and Lebanon. Beyond being the conscience of the nation, thoughtful young people can be shown opportunities to consider the deep questions of our time and move beyond the oversimplifications that lead to and result from polarization. Another place that fosters dialogue for all ages is an initiative by Catherine Richer of Minnesota Public Radio called Talking Sense. It uses the principles of marriage and family therapy to help people of different viewpoints to understand each other better. Again, these dialogues are not for the purpose of convincing, but to help people who value their relationships to stay connected, even if it means to agree to disagree. And so we move from asking the question, why do they think that way, to how did they come to this viewpoint? How did you come to this viewpoint? And be willing to learn and to listen. You can learn more about this particular process at talkingsense.mpr.org for those of you that might be taking notes. All of us can ask ourselves, what does the universe have to teach us? That can be a more global way, a more cosmic way to ask the question in a spirit of humility. What is the universe trying to teach us in this time? Recall last month's story that I shared about the woman who had been the victim of a bombing by the Irish Republican Army in London, and she lost her left leg. And later in life, she was part of a reconciliation process that took place in South Africa, because the South African society had been leaders in truth and reconciliation. And that process brought together people from the Irish Republican Army and people like her who had been victimized. And at one point, it was a survival exercise out in the wilderness, and they had to cross a river. And so she had to be carried across the river, and she was worried about getting her prosthesis wet and didn't know how this was going to happen. And there were actually these two gentlemen from the former Irish Republican Army who carried her across that river. And she began to see them in a new light and to recognize that if her life experience had been anything like theirs, that maybe she too might have made the kinds of decisions that they had made many decades earlier. Another extreme example, is a quote from a person who was dying of AIDS and said, "I didn't want this, I hated this, I was terrified of this, but it turns out that this illness has been my greatest gift. Now every moment is so precious to me. My whole life means so much to me." I think I've heard quotations similar to that from people with cancer as well. It reminds me also of a quote I heard a long time ago when a soldier said, "Thank God I came to Vietnam. I found faith here." So Pema Chodron wrote her book some years before, but she wrote a new afterword in 2016, and that's already 8 years ago, when she talked about the fact that there were refugee crises, economic disparity, environmental upheavals, political gridlock, ISIS, alienation, depression, anxiety, and a whole generation raised on electronic devices, getting in-depth, intensive training in being distracted. And that was 8 years ago, folks. There's so much uncertainty, so much that we cannot control, so much political seasonal affective disorder, as we talked about last time. So with our backs to the wall, we have choices to make every day. Shall we be angry and resentful, or shall we wake up and pay attention? Staying angry for the next 4 years could affect your health and mine. It could shorten our lives. And so we need to find ways to channel that anger into constructive action and personal growth. We also need to choose carefully our diet. I'm not just talking about the physical diet, which some of us may have overindulged last night, but it was so good. And thanks very much to Paul and Joy for hosting us. But we need to pay attention to our diet of news and not overindulge there, because it won't be good for us. I think many of you have experienced this already, and you recognize how depressed you are or how angry you become if you watch too much news. And you don't have to do that to yourself. There's only so much you really need to know, and it's probably the local news that you really need to know better, because there's so much we can't control on the national and international level. And so why put ourselves through that? When you wake up in the morning, is the first thing you do to doom scroll and look at all the bad news that's out there? Or do you read a poem or listen to some soothing music? There's a quote from the Hopi elders in the year 2000, a prophecy for the challenging times, where they wrote this: "There is a river flowing now very fast. It is so great and swift that there are those who will be afraid. They will try to hold on to the shore. They will feel that they are being torn apart and will suffer greatly." But then the Hopi elders go on to say that they advise us to push off into the middle of the river, keeping our eyes open and our heads above the water. Once there, we'll be able to see our companions in the river and celebrate. This could be a good time, they say. So instead of a response that we're tempted to do, to cower in the corner, hoping that chaos and suffering will just go away, we know better than that. And so the alternative is to use this opportunity to start waking up. Which is the more sane approach? If we do start surrendering to our uncontrollable situation and letting go of resistance and resentment, we'll have plenty of opportunities to learn and grow. Our world, no matter how crazy and unreasonable it gets, will become our greatest teacher. The world will never run out of messages to help us grow. Pema Chodron also talks about, at the time of the bombing of the World Trade Center in 2001, now it's a generation behind us, and there were people all over the United States who responded by practicing Tonglen, mentally sending out love and care to the victims and taking on their suffering. And then she refers to, in 2015, a young man killed 9 people at a South Carolina church, hoping to incite a race war, but instead members of that community publicly forgave him. And so during the time of increased and intensified conflict, altruistic consciousness is also on the rise. I'm reminded of Mr. Rogers' mother's words to him as a child in the face of devastation. Whenever there's tragedy, she said, look for the helpers. Look for the people who are helping to make the situation better and learn from them and take heart. Part of the coping strategy, I think, for us is to rely on one another here at All Souls. And so I made that little insert in your program today for the purpose of helping to find connections. You heard earlier, and I don't usually call people out by name, but the fact that it was a year and a half ago that we were putting on this musical program and discovered a couple of violinists discovered each other and have been playing together ever since. And yeah, that's great to be able to say you met at church. So maybe there are other connections that could be made among us. And so if that's something that you're open to, I invite you to write down your name, be bold, and share something about yourself that you may have in common with somebody else here at All Souls. And you might find a new friendship that can be part of your coping strategy during these troubled times. And I will conclude with a quote from Latino USA a couple of weeks ago where they said at the conclusion of their program, the powerful we will hold accountable and the vulnerable we will support. May it be true for us.
Thank you so much, Allan, for your words. Now it is the time when we ask you for your help to do the work of our congregation through an offering. Half of the collection plate today will go to Francis House, St. Francis House, and the other half will be for our continuing operating expenses. Thank you for giving to All Souls Church. Now please join me in saying the words to receive the offering. We give this gift freely. We receive these gifts gratefully. We dedicate these gifts to the work of a congregation, serving human wholeness, caring for our planet, upholding religious freedom, welcoming the stranger, loving one another. And now we're going to do our final song for today. It's page 349. We gather together.
Sing
you. And our last reading for today will be page 593. Liberation is costly. Liberation is costly. Even after the Lord had delivered the Israelites from Egypt, they had to travel through the desert.
They had to bear the responsibilities and difficulties of freedom.
There was starvation and thirst, and they kept complaining.
They complained that their diet was monotonous.
Many of them preferred the days of bondage and the flesh pot of Egypt.
We must remember that liberation is costly. It needs unity.
We must hold hands and refuse to be divided. We must be ready.
Some of us will not see the day of our liberation physically.
But those people will have contributed to the struggle.
Let us be united. Let us be filled with hope. Let us be those who respect one another.
Words from Desmond Tutu. To close this service, I will now extinguish the chalice. The chalice is extinguished, but the light goes with us out into the world. We will have our circle discussion right after coffee downstairs, and we will meet around 11:20.